As you can see from the label, this is a Russian Imperial Stout. It says we're going to have somewhere just below 8 to just over 8% alcohol by volume, and that the brewing difficulty for this kit is easy, which is great for us because we are novices. Alright, Mrs. Homesteader and I have decided that we are going to try our hand at home brewing. We've been experimenting. We've done one boxed set similar to this one, and we've done a couple of wine recipes that we've seen online. So we've become brave enough that we are going to actually try to create a video of this one. We went to a small microbrewery located in the town next to us, and we found this. It is Brewer's Best brand, and the kit that we chose to try is a Russian Imperial Stout 5-gallon kit. So I'll show you what's inside. Okay, so we're going to show you what's inside the kit, and just Mrs. Homesteader made the point on the cost of this. It was $60 to buy this. So, and for $60, this is what you're going to get. And two different size bags. One I think is 1 ounce, and the other is a half of hops. We have a set of directions. We have 8 ounces of crushed roasted barley, black malt. We have crushed caramel, 8 ounces. We got some caps. Bag. What else are we going to get down in here? Just got some priming sugar, and we'll get ready to do some bottling. Maltodextrin. Yummy. Now, down to our dry malts. We have extra dark. 2 pounds of it. Excellent. And then we have 2 of these. It is the traditional dark concentrated brewer's wort, unhopped. And see an amount on there, or a weight, but pretty stout little container. We have 2 of those. And then the final ingredient, other than some advertisements in the bottom, is our dry ale yeast. 1 container, it says 11.5 grams. So that is the contents of our Russian Stout, and we're going to jump into putting these together, see what we can come up with. Alright, so in the directions, number 1, read all directions. Done that. Number 2, sanitize everything that's going to come in contact with your wort and beer. And we will definitely be doing all of that. Then, number 3, we're going to get 2.5 gallons of clean water into our brew pot, heat it up. And we're going to bag up our grains. And when we get this water to 150 to 165 degrees, we are going to steep our grains for 20 minutes. So that is what we're going to get into. And here we are with our stock pot. It's got 2.5 gallons of water in it. Burner is on, she's heating up. Got our temperature gauge run in there so that we will know when we've hit our target temperature. Alright, so this is the bag that comes in the kit. Pretty good size bag. These are the 2 individual bags of grains that they say we need to steep for 20 minutes. So we are going to get these bags grain in here. So there's the bag of crushed caramel. Now for the 8 ounces crushed roasted barley. They don't look like much when they're in the plastic bags, but once they're in the provided bag, it's actually quite a bit of grains. They said to tie a knot in the top. Now it's ready for steeping. This is what the wort looks like, and we are not quite halfway through the steeping, and already we have a nice dark brown rich color. Okay, our timer has gone off. This has been steeping for 20 minutes, and it says in the directions that we should allow this bag to drain of liquid without squeezing it. So Mrs. Homesteader over here came up with the idea of using this strainer. We're going to take this out. Set that right in there. We're just going to let that set there for a few minutes and make sure it's drained all the liquids out. Okay, this has been setting for a few minutes. It has pretty much got all of the liquids out of it. So we'll set this over here. That will head to our compost bin. And the directions say the next step is to bring the water and the wort back up to a rolling boil. So we will turn up our heat. According to the directions, as soon as the wort comes up to a small rolling boil, we are going to stir in the maltodextrin, the extra dark dry malt, and the 2 containers of liquid malt. So as soon as this comes to a boil, we'll stir all of this in. One of the tips on the brewing instructions says before you get ready to add the liquid malt extract into the wort, putting it into some hot water is not a bad idea. Softens it up a little bit and makes it a little easier to pour into the wort. Okay, in goes the liquid malt. And it pours sort of like molasses too. Very thick. Alright, so we're going to add this in slowly. Adding in the dry malt extract. You see some of it is getting sitting on the top, but it's mixing in fairly quickly. You want to stir and make sure all of that gets mixed in. And then we will move on to the maltodextrin and that'll be the last thing that we need to add before we bring it back up to a rolling boil again. As you can see, that's almost all disappeared that quickly. So let's move on to the maltodextrin. Okay, so we've already put the dry extract in there. As you can see, it gets a little gunky around the edge. The steam coming up will actually gunk that up, so you want to make sure that bag is good and open when you do it. Now we're moving on to the last ingredient, which is the maltodextrin. We'll add that, stir that in. And now we're supposed to, once this is mixed in, get this back up to a nice rolling boil again. So try to get the heat back up underneath of it and see if we can get our boil on here. And it says once it gets back to a boil, we're going to have to add in some hops here. So we'll get this dissolved, and then we'll get the boil going. Okay, we've worked this back up to a slow boil, and we are going to add the 1 ounce container of hops. They say in the directions to be careful at this point, because adding the hops can cause this to boil over. So they say to be careful with that. Add it slowly. And I will tell you, if you are a beer lover and a lover of stouts, this this wort smells amazing. And when you smell the hops, you cut that top off and smell that, whoa, here to tell you, it's heavenly. So we're going to add this in. Stir it in there. I'm going to do so slowly because I don't want to boil over, because this wort is thick, thick, thick. And a boil over would be a messy experience. So we're going to add this 1 ounce container. We're going to set our timer, and we are going to allow this to just sit and slowly boil for 30 minutes according to the directions. And on the direction sheet, if you buy this kit, you'll see it has a spot to write down your time, so that you are sure that it's only boiling for 30 minutes. Because after the 30 minutes, we're going to add in the other packet and let it go for yet another 30 minutes. Okay, this wort has been boiling for 30 minutes exactly, and we are now getting ready to add the 1/2 ounce packet of hop pellets in here. And again, we're going to do it slowly, make sure we don't have a boil over. Those are in there. I'm going to give those a slight stir. And again, I know I've said it when I talk about the smell, but my Miss Homesteader here is a lover of stouts, and even she said, boy, this has got an aroma. Strong, strong wort. So this is going to be some mighty, mighty fine stout. Okay, we're going to shut off the heat. This has been boiling with that second addition of hops for another 30 minutes. So that means we have boiled this for a total of 60 minutes with the 2 different addition of hops total. So we're going to take this off from here, and we have a double sink, so we're going to exchange it back and forth in cold water bath. We're going to bring this temperature of this wort down as quickly as we can to a 70-75 degree room temperature setting before we put it into a fermenter. So off the stove, into the sink. Okay, So we've poured our wort into our 6.5 gallon fermenter, and now what we need to do is add water up to the 5 gallon mark, and that's what we'll do now. Okay, so we've added enough water to bring this up to exactly the 5 gallon mark, and they say in the directions to be careful to add just the 5 gallons and not more. So now we're going to add the yeast. They say do not rehydrate the yeast in the directions, so we won't. They say just to sprinkle it right over the top of the entire wort. So there it is. And now we'll get that stirred in, and then we'll simply add the lid, the bubbler, and airlock, and we're done. And then we'll just sit back and wait for it to do its fermentation. Okay, so we've got the yeast all stirred in. Going to put on our cap with our airlock, and then we're going to let this set for probably 4 to 5 days. Here we are, 9 days later. We've got our boxes of bottles out, so we're going to be ready to move on to bottling day. The fermentation stopped a day or two ago, and it says that we should not bottle until 48 hours after the fermentation is stopped. So tonight we're going to get these bottles ready and move on to our priming sugar and get this into bottles for a couple of weeks. One of the things that we have to do to prepare for bottling is to sanitize the caps that they send with this unit. They send 60 caps. I don't think we're going to use quite that many, but I'm going to pour them out into a bowl, and I have a container here with some sanitizing solution, and I am just going to pour that on there and let those soak in that sanitizer until we are ready to put them on the bottles. Okay, we have a small saucepan, and we have put 2 cups of water in there. We're going to bring this up to a boil, and then we're going to put in our priming sugar. Okay, what we're going to do now is mix this priming sugar into this water. Not quite boiling yet, but I want to make sure I get this in here and get it stirred until all of it is dissolved. Okay, so we have our 6.5 gallon brew bucket that contains our stout beer, and what we're going to do is we're going to work that down into a secondary bucket, another 6.5 gallon fermenting bucket, and this is where we're going to put the water with our priming sugar in it, and then we are going to siphon the stout beer down into this, and we'll gently stir it for a few minutes to make sure that it's mixed in good to the entire batch. And then when we put this into the bottles from here, that priming sugar is going to, over the next couple of weeks, carbonate our beverage. So on to the next step. Alright, Mrs. Homesteader and I siphoned off the batch, which was just under 5 gallons when we started. These are some bottles that we bought when we bought our very first kit back a month or so ago, and the caps that were provided with the unit, and we now have 50 bottles of Russian Imperial Stout. So the final step, 2 weeks, will return, and Mrs. Homesteader will give us her verdict as to how this recipe turned out. Alright folks, Mrs. Homesteader and I tested this Imperial Russian Stout out. We both agree it is awesome. It has a very strong malty flavor. We definitely would do this again. We say hats off to the Russians. So from Maine on a incredibly cold and snowy day, we send a definitely 2 thumbs up verdict for this, and we would definitely brew it again. Cheers from Maine.